Disney Live Action Remake. The four words have become more and more dreaded by animation fans as time goes on. To the general public, they're presented as childhood classics that had been brought to life like never before. However, at this point in time, more and more people are starting to see these remakes for what they really are: cheap cash grabs. Basically, Disney would take one of their successful animated movies and recreate the exact same movie but in live action. And more often than not, the result is just a soulless copy of what came before. These movies rely on the success of the iconic animated counterparts. And unfortunately, it works, as they bring in the high box office numbers, which further incentivizes Disney to keep making more, as at this point, they're all about profit, and creativity is pretty much dead there. At this rate, more live action remakes are being released than original animated features from the studio, which is concerning. Even worse is that these live action remakes perpetuate the general public's perception that animation is an inferior art form, which couldn't be more untrue, as many of the Disney animated films that came first are still to this day incredible works of art, while the live action versions are just mediocre clones that reach up with their success, and undeservingly make around the same amount of money, and in some cases even more. While the mainstream attention for these live action remakes have become slightly less positive as of recently, it's unlikely that Disney will stop or tend to improve at making these movies, as long as there's money to be made, hence why this trend still needs to be criticized. Case in point, this video, where I'll go over some of the key points that make Disney live action remakes so awful. Often the most well-known retellings of familiar stories takes their basis of the original concept, but reinvents it into a unique vision. That's not to say straying too far off from the original source material always works, as it takes creativity and real effort to create a memorable reimagining that not only stands on its own, but also becomes iconic in its own right. However, those are two qualities that are non-existent when it comes to Disney in its current state, so they end up going in the opposite extreme, which is the psycho remake method, which in a nutshell is doing the exact same movie, but inferior in every aspect. The filmmakers of these remakes are caught between a rock and a hard place, as they're restricted by having to follow the same story beats of the animated versions, which leaves no room to implement changes without them coming across as jarring. Some of these live action remakes just straight up copy scenes from the animated versions word for word. Not only is this a lazy way to make movies, but the fatal flaw of this method is that frequently, the filmmakers of these remakes fail to consider what makes certain scenes from the animated versions work so well. There are several little details, such as line delivery, vocal tones, body language, and facial expressions that make all the difference. However, in these remakes, all of these nuances are ignored, resulting in pale imitations that lack any merit of their own. But even when the filmmakers attempt to go in a different direction for some moments, it fails miserably, as the scenes from the original animated movies were well thought out and written, in order to deliver the best direction for the story and its characters. So following the same plot but changing certain details usually ends up derailing it. It's hard not to speculate that not a lot of thought was put into these changes, as they often completely miss the point that the scenes from the animated versions conveyed, and it results in the plot direction and character decisions becoming confusing. And if not that, then certain moments from the live action remakes just end up being inferior in comparison to the animated versions. Another staple of Disney live action remakes is the prominent use of horrendous looking CGI. Now I won't put the blame on the animators themselves, considering that they're overworked and underpaid, and besides, these problems stem from Disney forcing the special effects artists to work under crunch time to push as much content out as possible, which hinders on the quality. Although these remakes are live action, there are certain aspects of the original animated films that can be translated into that style, so some of the characters are recreated with computer animation. But the majority of the time, the transition from hand-drawn animation to CGI results in some atrocious visuals. Oftentimes, the design choices used to differentiate the CGI characters from the original designs don't seem to have a lot of thought put into them. Another issue is that the designs go too far in the realistic direction, but not completely, resulting in them looking extremely uncanny. There's a massive problem that arises from trying to be as realistic as possible, as often the importance of expression is neglected. The prime example with this issue is with the Lion King remake. The direction of that movie is so hyper-focused on realism that they completely missed the key aspect of what made the animated version so emotionally powerful were the facial expressions of the characters. The remake is almost entirely identical to the original, but comparing scenes from both movies is laughable, as the CGI versions of the characters are so lacking in facial expressions, that the drama that the movie is trying to convey falls completely flat. Another infamous example is the genie from the Aladdin remake. Now in the animated version, the genie had human-like features, but with cartoony exaggeration, which lends itself into the visual style of the movie perfectly, resulting in a highly appealing and iconic character design. The remake, however, went into a completely different direction for the genie, that being Will Smith but blue, which results in such a ridiculous design. This problem got so bad that when images of Pinocchio's design for the 2022 remake had been released to the public, and people saw they looked exactly like his original design from the animated film, it gave them hope that it might be one of the rare Disney remakes that are actually good. Yeah, about that. And even then, the movie still falls victim to horrific CGI designs. Case in point, Monstro. They could have gone for a simple whale, like in the original, but instead they had to make him into some weird sea monster with a stupid design. Anyway, that's enough ranting about the CGI designs. Let's move on to another pressing issue that plagues the majority of live-action remakes. In recent years, there's been a major push for more independent and stronger female characters, which is a genuinely admirable cause. However, media studios try so hard to appease the impossibly high standards of the terminally offended crowd, that they end up overcompensating for how women were written in older pieces of media, resulting in dated, idealistic characters with no personality or personal force to overcome, and are so overpowered that they face no real challenges, making it completely impossible to engage with their characters. Disney has been the epitome of this issue, and the live-action remakes are no exception. How often do you hear some celebrity or journalist claim that every Disney female lead before Frozen was nothing but a pretty face with no personality, as well as a helpless damsel? However, in reality, this claim only applies to Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, as from the beginning of the Disney Renaissance and beyond, there have been many three-dimensional female leads. However, that doesn't stop pseudo-activists from ignoring that in order to try and sound smart and progressive. Unfortunately, the people at Disney take their word for it, not even understanding their own films. So in the live-action remakes, they try way too hard to fix what wasn't broken in the first place. One example is Belle from Beauty and the Beast 2017, as the actress playing her, Emma Watson, pushed heavily for changes to make her character more quote-unquote feminist. These included making her an inventor instead of her father. There's also a scene where the villagers lash out against Belle for teaching a girl to read, along with inventing stuff despite being a woman. Now at first, you'd think this scene might be a setup that gets paid off later on, like Belle saving the day in the climax with one of her inventions, or with the knowledge she's gained from reading, thus delivering a solid feminist message against sexism. But nope, that doesn't happen, because as I mentioned earlier, the remakes followed the story from the animated version so closely that there's little room for major changes. So, the scene just ends up serving no purpose other than making a statement, which according to modern Hollywood, matters more than a well-written story. Now, the original animated version actually does a much better job at this, as there's a scene where Belle crafts back against Gaston's misogyny swiftly, and the scene gets a progressive message across to the audience, without disrupting the flow of the narrative. Also, this moment serves a purpose in establishing Gaston as an antagonist. Another notorious example of this problem is with the 2020 Mulan remake, which is baffling, because the animated version was already a progressive female empowerment story, and a fantastic one at that, as it's engaging to watch Mulan overcome adversity through her own strengths, such as her intelligence and resourcefulness, which does an excellent job at showing that a woman can save the day. But whereas the animated Mulan was just a regular woman, which makes the message inclusive to all girls watching the movie, the live action version completely misses the point, and gives her literal superpowers. Not only does this turn the character into a flawless and overpowered Mary Sue with a bland personality that's impossible to relate to, but it also undermines the feminist message of the animated version by implying that girls need superpowers to fight in a war. On the other side of the coin is the recent trend of emasculating male characters in these remakes. There is a difference between breaking gender roles and simply reversing them, and the filmmakers of the live action remakes are guilty of the latter, as they seem to think that they need to tear down the male characters, making them weak and useless in order to prop up the female characters. Both male and female characters can be strong and competent, as that is true equality, but Disney seemed to have missed that memo. Such examples include the recent Peter Pan remake, called Peterpan and Wendy, although if Disney was honest, they would have called the movie Wendy, as the competence and charisma that Peter had in the animated movie has been completely erased. and he gets sidewinded in order for Wendy to become the hero, leading to this moment.
You have the boy's magic.
No, this magic belongs to no boy.
Yeah, the female empowerment that was intended with this line falls short due to the cringy execution. Then there's the newly released Little Mermaid remake. Now in the original animated version, both Ariel and Prince Eric saved each other's lives, making them equals. But I guess since Eric is the one who ultimately defeats the villain, that's still not enough for the woke psychos. And so, for the remake, Ariel is the one who defeats Ursula, even doing so the exact same way Eric did, by sailing a ship and ramming it into Ursula. Except, how can she stand upright with a mermaid tail? If they really had to have Ariel defeat Ursula, they could have at least attempted to have her do so in a way that makes sense. But I guess taking something away from a male character and giving it to a female character takes priority over logic. And last but not least, Disney losing its magic, as these remakes are devoid of any creativity, and if Peter Pan and Wendy is an indication, all the whimsy and wonder from the animated versions is gonna be removed in favor of being more realistic and mature, and they can't even get that aspect right, making these movies completely worthless. And that was my video on the Disney live action remakes. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to give it a like, share, and comment. Also subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. And if you're interested in supporting my channel, then head over to my Patreon. Well, I got nothing else to say, so see ya.